Oh, good afternoon, everybody. It's James West reporting live from the studio here high atop the economic centre of the universe in Toronto, and I'm here with my good friend Todd Shapiro from Canada Talks Sirius XM 167. Todd, welcome.
Well, my goodness, you have the most advanced microphones I've ever seen in my life. And jolly day to you.
Thank you so much. It's very nice of you to recognise that fact, but we're happy to report that this information is alive and well in the general financial universe. So despite the fact that the market is soaring higher on the news that the committee recommending that cannabis continue to be federally deprohibited is not actually representative of the step even in the right direction, my dear friends. This is a Democratic initiative, a Democratic committee.
Stop raining on people's parade. They have needed some sort of good news today. We've needed a bit of an announcement here that is like, there's a lot of retail investors who have watched this stuff plunge. Can we just stop with the realism?
Well, you know, if the world, I mean, and I know this is the world we live in, that we prefer fantasy to reality. I understand that. I get that. However, that is not the world that I live in. So it is, unfortunately, falls to me to be the one who rains on the parade some of the time, because it's like, you're fucking crazy. That has nothing to do with it. That was announced Sunday night. It's a Democratic initiative going into the Democratic House. As soon as it gets to the Senate, the Republicans have code. They're never going to let the Democrats be the ones to champion a legalized cannabis federally bill in an election year.
What are you on today?
What am I on?
What are you on?
I just had a bowl of soup. Why?
Okay. That's good soup. I want some of that soup.
Wonton soup.
No.
Very good for you.
Okay, hey.
What?
I'm just saying.
What?
I don't
you
know.
don't think so?
It's good soup. Okay, James West. Okay.
Todd, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Markets are on fire.
A couple of things, though, regarding the cannabis sector.
Okay.
There was a bottom forming anyway from your chart perspective. You're a chart guy. You have to admit that. The sell-off's going on. We were starting to see a bit of a bottom there, right? Fair enough?
Oh, yeah, there was a bit of a lull in the momentum to the downside developing, for sure.
There were some decent earnings this week, Curaleaf and Trulieve, and some decent announcements on that end as well. Fair enough?
Trulieve reported 55 cents a share. Curaleaf reported good earnings, but has not published their financial statement on CDR yet.
Oh, fair enough. They haven't, so we haven't seen it. But you know,
or is it confusing? Possibly GTI now.
Yeah, I think GTI.
Well, this is what we see happening. Is the great bifurcation is underway.
What does that word mean?
Bifurcation means division into two of a body. But basically, U.S. MSOs have now demonstrated that the market and all of the dynamics in the U.S. market have made it very clear that companies that operate as MSOs in the United States have a very clear shot at making a shit ton of money on growing consumption of cannabis in a growing market that constitutes, as of right now, it's like 230 million Americans live in an area where cannabis can be accessed.
Truly was my biggest investment at one point.
Is that right?
I mean, I cashed out when the last time it hit 20.
Right.
But
good on you. I mean, you got out at the high.
Dude, I'm pretty good at this stuff.
Not bad for a
you know what my new buy
market
was a couple weeks ago? WWE. I bought it at 53.20. The thing's at like 61 today. It was a great buy. Real companies with real revenues. The World Wrestling Federation.
Oh.
I mean, that stock's getting back to $80 in my opinion. I can't give financial advice.
I didn't even know that was a sector.
It's a big sector. You talk about fake sector.
Well, we have a hell of a show today. We have Kim Rivers joining us all the way from Florida to talk about Trulieve.
She's on today?
She's on today.
Hey.
We have Alan Brochstein, 420 Invest, joining us to talk about Trulieve's earnings. And we have charting man Dan McDermott, who did not trade the bump in the Trulieve shares, but he has been trading rather well in and out of the rising market. As he says himself, he trades reversals very well. And so those are our three contributors today. So it's kind of like we're already all green. So I just thought I'd start with a small drizzle on the parade because
Fair enough. No, I mean, listen, I think you make a great point, right? There's still lots of steps to go to federal legalization. And quite honestly, I still think it's coming down to Trump who's going to do it. So don't worry about what's going on right now. Trump is going to do in some last-ditch effort to confuse everyone and just...
If he doesn't get shot.
I think about that sometimes.
Oh, I mean, gosh, he's got so many enemies, like 49% of the states hate him.
But what's really amazing though is the testimony of the colonel, I forget his last name, who recently the impeachment the impeachment trial going on right now. He has experienced threats, and a lot of the Democrats and the typical left-wing media are saying, what a shame he's receiving these death threats. And I'm like, you don't think Trump gets them every 2 seconds of the day here?
Yeah.
Like, come on. What about feeling bad for the president? As much as you don't like him, I'm sure he's under intense pressure that way as well.
Well, you just need to log on to Twitter to see all the, vindictiveness that's directed at, the United States has become a bifurcated nation.
Some Harvard student one day will do their thesis on the most hate ever done on social media. They'll measure it. They'll come up with the measurement of it.
You think?
And it'll be directed 1,000%, not that that's a thing, on Donald Trump. And the numbers will be astronomical towards the actual amount of whatever is structured or considered bullying or hate towards one individual. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night even if 10 people trash me on Twitter. So for that, I actually have respect for him. I'll say that publicly. I really do.
Yeah.
But he can just forge ahead somehow.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, it's remarkable. It is absolutely remarkable that he hasn't been arrested. I mean, really.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know, however he's dodging any bullet that he's dodging, and Teflon Don, like they call him.
Exactly,
I mean,
Teflon Don.
That I'll never understand. But
the last guy who was called Teflon Don?
Don...
Lottie Dottie, Free John Gotti, the king of New York.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Where he'd end up. Yeah,
exactly.
Didn't he get killed in jail?
He got killed in prison.
Yeah, he got
That's
killed in
right.
prison.
So, I mean, I don't, it's become so pointless to discuss American politics in Canada, to me anyways, because it's like, yeah, it's a disaster over there, and it's polarized, and it's ugly, and it's, it is what it is. It's like we can't do anything because we're up here in Canada. We're like, we get a seat at the table to watch, but we don't get to vote.
And this is where what fears me, though, because I think we can do something, and what we can do is not emulate ourselves after that model. And that's what I fear we're doing here in Canada, where the divide is running pretty deep now in Canada as well. And for conservatives and liberals, it is. Like, you can't even go and talk about Doug Ford anymore without being labeled something. You can't even talk about Don Cherry anymore without being labeled, because he's sort of that conservative-leaning, figure. So it's the one. That's the thing that upsets me the most. Is someone who always tries the middle. We've talked about this, finding the middle. You told me about your soffit theory. I love that. I pawned it off as my own. I have. But why we always say we hate everything that's going on in the States, yet for some reason I see Canada turning into that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why aren't we being proactive and saying, no, let's actually do what they're not doing, having a conversation?
I feared for a long time that Canadian politics was closely adhering to the U.S. model and becoming more and more like that, liberals versus conservatives. But thanks to our rather powerful immigrant presence in politics, the whole us versus them argument kind of only goes so far, and only in select groups of xenophobes who sort of perceive themselves in this point in time and this point in society that is not an accurate viewpoint of what Canada is. And so that whole franchise falls on deaf ears for the most part. It just doesn't have the ability to spread and become virulent like it does in America, where it's like, well, if you live in Iowa and you're a church-going Baptist, then
I'll tell you. Well, look what's going on in Alberta,
but that's Alberta. That's like one province out of 10 provinces, 11 territories.
Fair enough, but if all of a sudden you were in sort of an economic crisis in the province that you lived in, you might have a little bit more empathy for it, right?
Oh, dude, I can tell you, I've spent most of my life in an economic crisis, and I never blame the place I'm in for that result. I always blame myself. And this is actually very much to the point where, very much a point of the whole disconnect between what used to be political discussion and now outright verbal warfare, is that there's a huge contingent of the population that looks to blame the government. The climate change protests are a case in point. People gather around, wave signs made of paper and wood, drive their cars there, and scream at the government to do something about climate change. And it's like, what do you think the government can do? What do you think they're going to do? You buy coal, you buy natural gas.
The plastics alone. You know, how many of these? Because the youth is getting involved, but how many are going to want all these Christmas gifts? I was thinking about this really recently. Like, if you really wanted to make a difference for climate change, you would say no more gifts in Christmas. Mm-hmm. That's it.
That's been outlawed in our family for going on 20 years.
And I outlawed in my family. My parents thought I'm not even Christian. So the first they thought it was nuts.
No. Can you be Darwinist and Christian? No.
But my point being is, I said, just if you were going to spend $20, let's just put it in my kid's trust fund. You know, like let's set that up early. Don't worry, we're saving the environment. Don't waste. I don't want to be wasteful. I want to be more minimalistic in my approach. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
You bet.
The markets.
The markets. Well, we'll start with an interview with Kim Rivers and hear what she had to say as I challenge her on the biological assets line item in their financials. I'm joined now by Kim Rivers, CEO of Trulieve Cannabis Corp. Kim, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Kim, congratulations on, I guess, what we're going to call the flagship standard-bearing quarter of all cannabis companies, 55 cents a share net income. That's fantastic. Give me an overview of why that happened and how that's going to continue happening.
Well, as we've said at Trulieve, we're very focused on building a profitable and sustainable company. And you know what I hope to see is that we are the first of a number of companies in the U.S. who will be reporting strong results for this quarter. We've always been focused about providing an exceptional level of service, an exceptional level of product quality to our patients. Certainly, Florida remains our backyard and a key state for us. And again, our strategy has really just been focusing on fundamentals, making sure that we're delivering exceptional service and product quality to our customers, and really focusing on operations and operational excellence. So we're happy with our results, and this is just the beginning.
Sure. What is it with the state of Florida? It seems like of all the MSOs and all of the large-scale LPs, those operating in Florida have the best performance among every other LP. What is it about the state of Florida that makes it so accommodating for you?
Well, I would say that Florida, a couple of things. One, we do have, of course, a very high rate of adoption from a month-over-month standpoint, and so Florida is one of the fastest-growing markets in the U.S. with respect to folks coming into the program. So that certainly sets up a nice customer base for folks to sell to. Secondly, in Florida, we don't have limitations with respect to our cultivation size, our cultivation footprint, nor our production footprint. And then, of course, as you know, while there is a cap currently with respect to retail outlets, that number for Trulieve is 49 stores. That cap comes off in the spring of next year. So I think just the ability to reach scale, and with that scale, I think that's maybe a foreshadowing of what the cannabis industry can expect as some of these, artificial limitations in certain markets hopefully come off over time.
Mm-hmm. Of your $110 million reported in gross profit, $90 million comes from the adjustment of growth of biological assets, which leads a skeptical person to say, well, looks like they're basing a lot of their profit on future sales of inventory, which requires that the price that you account for it at the time you account for it at, is the same when you actually sell it. So is there any reason to look at that number and be a little nervous from the standpoint of an investor, in your opinion?
No, not at all. We've had strong, of course, retail sales and growth quarter over quarter. There is and continues to be strong demand at our stores. We have had no price compression yet in the Florida market. However, it should be noted that in terms of our cost basis and efficiency, we're actually getting more efficient and lowering our costs, both on the cultivation and production side on a quarter over quarter basis. So the other thing to keep in mind, of course, in this quarter, we did report, it was the first quarter that we had full inclusion of our greenhouse footprint. And so we more than doubled our reportable cultivation footprint in this quarter. And so that certainly would lend itself to higher inventory amounts with respect to biological assets. You will see when we harvest those greenhouses, which will be approximately twice a year, you're going to see some rolls, peaks and valleys with respect to our our biological number as it relates to that inventory.
Okay, so besides Florida, you've got California, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. What percentage of the performance in the last quarter was represented by those three states ex of Florida?
Sure. So we don't break it out specifically, but I can tell you that, of course, currently the lion's share of our profitability comes from Florida. We are, and as I mentioned on the call yesterday, which is available for folks if they want to listen to it. It's on our website. Connecticut continues to perform, but of course we have a smaller footprint in Connecticut. Massachusetts will come online next year and will provide some meaningful contribution both to revenue and to EBITDA in 2020, and we'll be updating folks as those cultivation and production and retail facilities, as well as our wholesaling initiative in Massachusetts, is fully approved by regulators in Massachusetts and is ready for prime time.
At what point does the state of Florida become saturated for you in terms of available locations? Are we 10% of the way there, 80% of the way there, or is there just still a ton of growth ahead in Florida?
Well, we are just under 300,000 patients in the state of Florida. And as a reminder, Florida is the second largest state in terms of population, with 21 million residents in the state of Florida. And of course, that's just strictly in the medical program, and those are full-time residents. That doesn't take into account any sort of potential future growth when you add in a potential adult use or recreational initiative and the tourism numbers. So I would say that, and also, of course, the patient growth rate is something that we look at and monitor very closely, has not stalled either. And so, so far we think that there is definitely additional growth, potential.
Sure. Does the prospect of a recreational market in Florida seem likely to you in 2020? And if so, what impact would that have on your bottom line?
Oh my gosh, it would have a tremendous impact on our bottom line, of course, in a positive way. In terms of, the likelihood of that initiative in Florida, getting a ballot initiative passed, like most states, it's a multi-step process. So we have two initiatives now that are working their way through the Supreme Court approval process. I think that we'll have better visibility in terms of likelihood once that process is complete, which I believe will be, near term in early 2020. It really then becomes a matter of whether or not the signatures can be garnered in the appropriate period of time. So, I definitely think that there's a possibility. I think it still is a little early to tell whether or not that's probable. But we certainly are supportive, and we are very much hopeful that 2020, and if not, definitely 2022, we will hopefully see recreational in Florida.
Sure. What is your most popular product category?
Flower right now.
Flower.
So Florida is an interesting state in that flower was not allowable. We were an oil-only state until March of this year. And so prior to flower, certainly it was our vape or inhalation lines of products were our most popular. Since Florida has come online, in terms of product mix, flower accounts for approximately 50% of products that we sell in our stores. And I would say that we haven't yet hit the top of the market with respect to flower. We have been, somewhat limited with respect to supply. And so I'm very interested, and we're interested at Trulieve to test, and we're continuing to ramp our available inventory with sellable flower. And so we're interested to test to see where that top of market is for that product category. But it's been very, very well received.
Sure. Kim, what excites you the most about 2020 in the cannabis industry for Trulieve?
Oh, there are so many things that excite me about 2020. We are very excited to enter Massachusetts, to show the Northeast what Trulieve can do in another state. We're excited to launch our wholesaling initiative. We've been spending a lot of time behind the scenes developing those products and that penetration strategy. So I'm very excited about that. And I think that there are going to be several catalysts. We're of course watching very closely the discussions in Congress related to safe banking, and then of course there's talks actually ongoing now related to other legalization and descheduling initiatives. So we think that again, U.S. cannabis is really we're in the early stages, but it's I think you're going to see some incredible growth across the industry in 2020.
You bet. Kim, a fantastic contribution as usual. It was great to talk to you. Please come and see us when you're in Toronto next.
Oh, will do. Thanks so much for reaching out.
Thank you. Bye for now. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at midasletter.com. So there's our first real great financial report from the cannabis sector that constitutes a consecutive quarter of significant profit on significant earnings in a growing business, and could happen to a nicer girl.
Lady.
Well, girl lady, lady girl, girl lady. Yeah, no, she's great.
She's great.
Yeah, have you met Kim before?
No.
I mean, we're taking a look at the chart right here, except, oh, did I forget to put my NDI system up here? Yes, I did. There it is. Okay, let's go back to it. So as you can see, the market is well receiving her performance. She's up $1.60. What? She's up 20, well, actually 1637, up from open of 1604. So a second consecutive day of the market loving what Kim's doing. We also had Alan Brochstein, who gave us some insight into what was happening and how he thought of the Trulieve financial statement. Here's Alan. I'm joined now by Alan Brochstein, CFA extraordinaire from 420 Invest. Alan, welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be here, James. We picked a good day today.
We certainly did. We picked a green day, and that led by financial results by some U.S. MSOs that are actually positive. Let's start with Trulieve. We had Kim Rivers on just a little while ago, and it was a heartwarming experience.
Well, so I didn't get the benefit of listening to that, but I listened to the call yesterday, and wow, talk about soft guidance. I guess they just want to make sure they can beat it. They are actually guiding for a down quarter if you actually look at the numbers, but I think you have to read between the lines and just say that they didn't want to update their guidance. That's probably what they should have said, James. We just don't want to update it. But it was a good report. They're cranking. They're doing well in Florida, and it sounds like they have some nice irons in the fire. In other places, like Connecticut, that may go legal, but they're definitely different than everybody else, James.
Right. Okay. So they were, 90% Florida, and Florida's got this strange ability to permit its MSOs to make money. And what is it about Florida from where you sit that's different?
Florida started off as a tough market. Trulieve had first mover advantage, so they've done just a phenomenal job there. The market itself is getting more competitive. On the Curaleaf call yesterday, they kind of called out their threat to Trulieve. We're coming after Trulieve, they said on the call, or something to that effect. But it's a market where they have made some nice changes, the most important of which was allowing flower. Originally that wasn't allowed, smokable flower, and that's really been driving the results. You can look at Liberty as well, doing very well in Florida. And for anybody that wants to learn more about Florida, they release weekly data, so you really get some granular data on the sale of oils and flower. So it's you can kind of watch that develop. And they asked her on the call yesterday about pricing and competition, and she said so far not really seeing anything. So.
Okay. So what other great financials have you been looking at?
So such a juxtaposition, and I kind of felt like this week we might be able to look at this. So we've been through the Canadian reporting cycle, and the companies, are all struggling on the bottom line, right? Everybody. I mean, there's really nobody that can say we're making money in Canada. And in the United States, well, Trulieve was already making money, and they continued to do so. We saw Curaleaf report a positive adjusted EBITDA. They haven't put out their CDR filings yet. I want to kind of go through that. They pulled out what they called some one-time expenses to make it positive. But in any event, they're moving in the right direction, to be fair. And so that was another one. Curaleaf is one of the largest MSOs, or maybe the largest, depending on how you want to define that. So their financials are moving in the right direction. And just in general, the United States has its set of problems and challenges, but at the same time, it has its strengths, and investors are going to start to notice that, and this may surprise people, but the two largest, as of this very minute, the two largest revenues in using the same currency, whether you want to convert it back to Canadian or use US, they're not Canopy and Aurora. They're Curaleaf and Trulieve, and it's kind of amazing because when you look a little bit below the top line, you see just much better profitability. And so we'll get GTI out after the close today, and I think it will also be bigger than Canopy and Aurora in its overall revenue. And remember, they in Canopy and Aurora have the whole world except for the United States, really, and these other ones are kind of constrained to the markets in which they're licensed, and yet they have more revenue. And so investors need to evaluate not only the profitability of the models, but at the same time understand the different risks of the markets as well.
Yeah, would you say that the Canadian failure to generate a profitable experience for investors, at least the later investors, is a function of, I thought, both that the company, the whole sector was overcapitalized in Canada relative to the market that existed in Canada. They raised too much capital because they held out the promise of the rest of the world, but the rest of the world has demonstrated without any doubt that they're not moving like Canada and the US are. They're not, making great strides in adopting recreational or medical cannabis. And so we have this situation where there's so many players in Canada chasing what ultimately is a single market of, call it 35 million people potentially. And whereas in the United States, you've got a total licensed addressable market of 230 million plus, and much fewer companies with much less capital having gone into it.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to blame the too much capital. I will say the too much capital made it easy to kind of blow through the capital and do some poor spending and build out. We're going to see more write-downs, let's put it that way. But I think the real reason, we've talked about it, James, is just a very poor regulatory structure in Canada. And, I respect, being all the eyes of the world on you. You want to do things cautiously. But, every time I look at Health Canada and the provincials, it seems like they like the black market. And I know that's not the case, but some think it is. But just a very poor regulatory structure. Let me throw something out there. Chicago, the city of Chicago, just gave out what are roughly being more licenses just in the city of Chicago than double what is in Toronto a year later, or more than a year later. So, and those are two comparable sized cities. It's just a totally different mindset in terms of going about thinking about retail. And so Canada hit the ground running with no retail stores open at all. They were thinking people would buy stuff online, and they may once they know what it is, but that was never going to work. So, Canada squandered really a whole year, and they're still not in the right gear. They're still going too slow in Ontario. And so, and everybody's talking the same story, and there's truth to it. Until there's more stores, Canada's going to have a real hard problem really living up to its potential, James.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, do you think that there's a national divide between investment opportunities now that is more or less a reliable way to categorize what is worthy and what is not? Stay away from Canada and consider the U.S. for cannabis investments going forward?
Yeah, I'm not going to You've asked me that before. I do think that there are certain better opportunities in the United States, but there's some good ones in Canada as well. I think about the baby in the bathwater syndrome. The sentiment is so bad in Canada now. Everything that we're talking about is very well known. So I think the prices of the stocks, the fundamentals may be better in the United States, and they're probably going to improve in Canada, but it just depends on the situation. I think if you look at the leading MSOs and you look at their market caps and then you compare them to the largest LPs, then your takeaway is correct. But I think you can go a little bit beneath the top in Canada and find some attractive investments.
All right, Alan. Well, that's a great contribution. As per usual, I really appreciate your time, and we'll come back to you next week. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, James.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. Yeah, so Alan's very bullish on the day. He likes Trulieve. He still likes cannabis. Still loves cannabis. What are we all going to do if cannabis just completely goes dark?
Cannabis sector, the companies, the cannabis itself? What are you talking about?
Cannabis went to like the mining market did at the end of 2012.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all know this. There's good companies and there's bad companies. There's companies that try to scam off, emerging industries and retail investors diving in without doing due diligence, and those ones don't last. That always is the case. And I'm not even saying they're pump and dumps. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's just terrible companies out there that do a quick RTO, that aren't really focused on any sort of business plan, and people get caught up in the hype, unfortunately. They get caught up in the hysteria. Whose fault is that? It's the person who hits buy. I'm sorry. There has to be accountability in what you choose to buy.
Ooh, there's a whole bunch. I just heard a big roaring cheer of applause out there on Bay Street.
But it's fact.
You're blaming the investor.
Listen, I was before I knew anything, I was buying stupid companies.
Right.
And
caveat emptor for sure is what rules the day, especially if you're a Darwinist. I mean, the market is a predatory wealth transfer machine. If you don't understand that basic fact, then you're probably in the wrong place. Or you're probably in the process of having your wealth transferred away from you and to somebody else who probably comes downtown every day for a living.
And then there's just luck and timing too.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people who can get very wealthy off those types of companies as long as they have an exit and don't get too greedy.
The cannabis sector, though, part of the problem is it's been overcapitalized by Bay Street in Canada for the size of the market. We capitalized it because the Canadian cannabis complex promised the world, but so far has only been able to deliver Canada. Well, the amount of capital that's gone into servicing the Canadian audience, that's like, imagine $100 billion going into a handful of companies just for Vermont or California. Let's be generous even. It's like, okay, if you put $50 billion into all of Canada, that would be fine. Then there would not be the intense oversupply of both cannabis and stock that exists in the cannabis space, and there'd be a much more competitive landscape. Right now, you just have this cutthroat thing going on where it's the massively overcapitalized LPs against the undercapitalized but wholly non-compliant unlicensed sector who can afford to take a loss, who can afford to grow and grow and grow and never care about what the costs of packaging are. So, I mean, I think that's part of the problem. Certainly investors who fall prey to the story, the sales pitch, have only themselves to blame. I've done that a million times.
Me too. I mean, I still
that's called learning the hard way.
You learn the hard. There's a lot of hard learning going on, and there's still. I'm hopeful of the industry as a whole still. I really am. I'm. It's not to say I'm bullish right now on the market, but I'm definitely hopeful because we are seeing steps in the States, and I know you kind of let us know really what that stands for just at the beginning of the show today. That is sort of them pushing through a bill that the Republicans aren't going to want if they're pushing it through. That's just to save time. I'm explaining it in great detail, but there are steps, and in 10 years from now, so 10 years, that's how investors use. That's how Warren Buffett looks at investing, by the way, right? In 10 years from now, where will we be in the United States? Do you figure? Completely
10 years
legal
from now?
Yeah.
I think it'll probably be legal in every state except Utah.
It's already legal in Utah.
They'll probably make it illegal again. Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't see any state.
It's going to be federally legal in 10 years.
Oh,
come on.
Well, I think it's going to be federally legal in 2020, but it's not going to happen through the normal processes. It's going to be a race to the executive order by the candidates who are vying for the 2020 presidential election. And we both know who's going to be the first to that poll.
Donald Trump.
And is going to be the loudest. Exactly. So I think that that's why, among other reasons, the expectation that this committee voting to proceed with the is kind of like you're looking at the wrong thing here. It's like the Safe Banking Act is going to be far more effective in advancing the interests of federal deprohibition than this little committee initiative is going to be.
Yes, but it's showing signs at least. And my point being about where will it be 10 years from now? If you were investing some companies today, looking at the prices where they're at right now, even though they have high valuation still, knowing some of the strategic partnerships they've already aligned themselves with, whether it's a canopy and an acreage or whatever it may be, there's still, I think, opportunity long-term for some companies because cannabis is everywhere. And the bigger issue is how are they going to crack down on the black market? And they're not doing that in Canada well. And I hope they find a way to do that in the States as they do this federally legalized thing. Because if we get rid of the black market, I mean, we don't go buy an alcohol. We both like alcohol. We're spending $14 on a drink when we go to a bar, and that's what we're spending here. We don't go around the corner and get it for 25 cents.
I have a still.
Yeah, right.
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm going to give you some pear brandy that'll knock your lid off.
Well, you know what? There's not a lot of that though.
No, I'm an outlier. I grow my own weed. I brew my own beer. I distill my own whiskey, and I would grow my own tobacco, but I can't seem to grow just the right amount that keeps me healthy. Why, getting into trouble there. Anyways, but no, so there are people who like to DIY everything are fewer and far between. So yeah, you can't go into I think that we're moving into a world where there is a greater appreciation for craft individualized production. And we see that in cannabis.
Well, they get bought up, though. Like the beer companies.
Look at the microbrews, exactly. But
I'm a partner in a microbrew. I have 5% stake in a company called Lake Wilcox Brewing.
Lake Wilcox, where is that?
It's in Vaughan.
Okay.
It's on Edgeley Boulevard.
Oh.
It's we got my own like Todd Shapiro Show branded beer. I'll bring you some for Christmas.
That's right. I remember you telling me about that.
I get the hopes are to get bought out. It's a tough business. It's tough month over month. It's a very tough industry, and they're selling a lot. They're in 70 LCBOs and beer stores, but it's a really tough industry. The goal is an exit strategy. So that's what this cannabis. That's what I mean. There's still going to be companies that are going to be in 10 years from now massive, and the ones that today. So there's still lots of opportunity.
Sure.
It's just a matter, can you stomach what's going on in between?
Well, and can you afford to hold out? Like that's the other
liquidity.
thing. So many people put portions of their net worth at risk that they can't afford to leave at risk for the full maturation of the investment. Like guys put in money and say, okay, I got to get this out of the market in 6 months because that's when I run out of my house payment fund, for example. And they get 6 months down the road and the stock's deep underwater and they're like, oh shit, I need that money back. I need that money back to pay bills. And it's like, well, you can have it back at a discount because the market is the market.
Well, the other big risk a lot of people take is, and they forget to do this, is they actually make a lot of money on a stock. Like in the cannabis industry, a lot of people went through that bull market, were going, oh my God, I've never seen returns like this. They weren't in their TFSAs, and then they had the big tax bill at the end of the year. So what did they do? Did they borrow against it to pay their tax, or did they cash out? And I know some guys who borrowed to pay their taxes, kept money in, and then the decline happened, so they're paying interest for their taxes, and I mean like a few $100,000 in taxes. So people, which was a newer, much a much higher tax bill than they'd ever expected or ever had in their life. So the key is, I think, with investing as a whole, and who the hell am I, James West? I'm nobody, really nobody, is to never get too greedy.
What do you mean? You're Todd Shapiro.
It's to never get too greedy.
Well, that's true, but I mean, borrowing to pay the government, though, does not a lot of sense make. I mean, the government should not be forcing anybody to borrow to pay their taxes. I mean, the government is a...
Yeah, but it was but it's because they didn't want to sell off their gains.
So it's at their own discretion.
Yes, of course. It's the same way that same people were taking second mortgages on homes, going, I'll get a line of credit for 3%, thinking I can make 15%.
Right.
That happens a lot. The crypto stories were crazy.
Yes.
People were doing that.
Yes. Well, I tend to not. I've never borrow money. I don't borrow. I don't
borrow a thing either.
I don't even have. I mean, I have credit cards that automatically reset from my bank account to zero. That's it. I don't have a credit card that I pay. I've never paid interest on a credit card.
Good for you. Yeah, I have a monthly payment too. It just comes out.
Yeah. So no, that's exactly right. So let's talk about the psychedelic sector. You're the CEO of
Yeah, Red Light Holland. Raise is currently going on. Like I said, I'm not going to get too much into the business model because it's for accredited investors. It's early. The raise is going very well, quite honestly. And if you're an accredited investor, we of course reach out to First Republic. They're the brokers on record, so I can't I can't collect money.
Sure. The sector, though.
The sector. Well,
the psychedelic sector. Is it because there are none publicly traded now, correct?
There is an investment fund, Roadmen, LIT, L-I-T-T is their trading symbol, and they're investing right now into sort of the space carefully. I don't think they're actually psychedelics. I think they're more mushroom investments and learning the space. So you can check out that company, and we've had conversations with them because this is an industry I think people want to come up together. We don't want sort of this in-house fighting. This, I'm Canopy, I'm Aurora. I think there's a lot of that in the cannabis.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And we won't be like that because that goes against the whole premise. And by the way, I like both Terry and Bruce, so I'm not saying we won't be like them. I'm just saying, there's been talks and we've had conversations with 5 different companies now of people who plan on going public, who are doing raises. A lot of them are in the clinical trials aspect and space, and we're not. So I think that we're looking at this as how do we get the message out about this, not only the industry on the capital market side, but really what our belief is in psychedelics and what our belief is in mushrooms, to be quite honest, which is the psilocybin aspect of, and I've said this on your show many times now, how we feel that this can be a great alternative to these sort of big pharma prescribed medications that aren't quite doing their jobs.
Sure. Here's a guy who looks like he likes to enjoy psychedelics, but I don't know if he does. He's certainly a very astute technical analyst. Charting Man Dan joins us for a segment. Joined now by charting man Dan McDermott from thechartguys.com. Dan, welcome back.
Glad to be back, James. Thanks for having me.
Dan, I'm sensing that you must have had a couple of interesting days this week, given the huge volatility, the bounce. What's happening in your universe?
Absolutely. It's been a great bounce. I specialize in oversold bounces. I don't know why. I love them, and my results tell me to keep playing them. It's just one of my strengths as a trader. So when we get extreme sentiment to the downside, that's when I pay attention. And we get to a point, again, where I think the last time we talked, where there is nobody left to go bearish. Everybody that's going to short has shorted. And that's when we see the shift, and that's when we see the bounce take place. So scaling in a little bit, but went in heavy on the gap down open yesterday, and scaling out today on the gap up opens, and just enjoying the volatility and the really nice bounce. And again, it just goes back to everybody looking in one direction, and that's when it's time to be contrarian and start looking in the other direction.
Okay, so I guess it's been a purely technical trade for the most part for you, even though one might suggest that to what extent would you say that Trulieve's excellent quarter, in stark contrast to the rest of the sector, had a sort of a calming effect and might have been, at least in some respects, psychologically responsible for some reversal sentiment?
Yeah, that's the right word, psychological. So this most recent trade, definitely technicals played a part in it. I'm looking at the 4-hour RSI, and it's at historical bounce levels on CGC. So that's when I pay attention. But it's more psychological, absolutely. Again, it's everybody looking in one direction. So the fact that TRU had bullish earnings, it only helps. It keeps people confident. It keeps people, I was shocked at their numbers, and they are serving 1.13% of the Florida population right now. And if we get 2020 legalization in Florida, their market cap is going to, or their target market is going to increase by over 1,000%. So TRUL is just proving that it is positioned very well for progress. And there's not even edibles in Florida yet. So a bright future ahead for TRUL. And it was, like I said, it keeps sentiment, but it's not stokes. It's the opposite of stokes. It culls some fear in the sector. I don't think it's leading to this bounce right now in Canadian MJ. I think the Canadian MJ earnings saw extreme bearish reactions. We saw money start to flow into the US MJ sector Thursday, Friday, Monday. And in my opinion, this is just big boys, the banks, Bank of America putting out an upgrade on CGC today. To me, that means, hey, we bought this extreme fear over the last couple of days. Now we're going to put out an upgrade and have retail FOMO chase and drive this price up for us. So they're playing their usual games. They were ready for this to buy the extreme sentiment, but it is looking nice in the USMJ space. If we can get some weekly trend changes in USMJ, it's definitely going to be a big sigh of relief for the sector as a whole.
Sure. To what extent do you think today's vote in the House about federal deprohibition, that's just not a non-event for you?
No, and the headlines, I mean, you see that I got a text from my buddy last night. Is Congress voting to legalize marijuana? No, the headline is misleading. There's a congressional committee that's voting on a bill. If that passes, which it likely will, it'll go to the Congress. If the Congress passes, which it probably will, it'll go to the Senate, and then it won't probably ever get voted on. It's not going anywhere. The SAFE Act has a way better chance of getting passed than this current bill that the headlines are talking about. But again, it's just all a game, and it was nice timing for this headline to come out. And this headline came out Monday, and we still saw weakness right after this headline came out for all of Monday. But it is what people can now point to for a reason. Again, CNBC and people that trade these markets need a reason. The ones that don't understand the psychological and technical aspect of things, they need a reason for moves to be taking place. So they're looking at this. I got a news alert from Fidelity yesterday saying MJ sector is bouncing on the news of this vote taking place. No, that news came out, Sunday night? I saw those headlines Monday. We dumped Monday. So no, that's not the reason.
Right. Interesting. Is it your contention that the vote, it won't be voted on in the Senate because the Senate's Republican controlled and it's a democratically sponsored initiative?
Absolutely. With what's going on in the Senate right now, there is no chance Mitch McConnell is going to bring this bill up to be voted on. And again, SAFE Act has some bipartisan support. Mitch did go out to the West. He did visit some MJ states. He probably will have some incentive personally to have that go through. But even that is going to be facing a bunch of hurdles just because of the impeachment environment that's currently going on. So it's nice. It's nice for the headlines. It's nice for sentiment. It's nice to get the conversation going. But, reality of this bill having a chance to pass without a change in president or a change in the majority in the Senate, it's just not going to happen.
Sure. If you look closely at the Trulieve financials, their revenue number was $70 million. And their fair value adjustment on the growth of their biological assets was $90 million. So in terms of the total gross profit of $110 million, it's like almost 90% of that was biological assets. And so if you look at that ratio of biological assets to revenue, it's very questionable. And so I'm curious as to to what degree is the 55 cents per share net income reported a result of some creative accounting on the biological assets number. And so when fully absorbed by the market and taken into context, and people say, oh, well, geez, that's not really the big profit that it seems to be, because it's based on future inventory reaching maturity, which is always also based on the price that you're going to realize when you sell it being the same as when you account for it. So I'm just curious as to what extent, if that financial statement was ultimately believed to be less credible than it is currently being sort of bandied forth in the market by mainstream financial media, do you think that the resumption of the downward cycle could actually set in here before Thanksgiving maybe, and certainly before Christmas?
No, it would have happened by now if that were going to be you're absolutely right. There's plenty of examples of creative accounting in this space in the past half year that we can point to. But in my opinion, the market would have already responded to that. I mean, the pattern for TRUL earnings has been maybe even the last 4 or 5 of them, has been to sell off in reaction to earnings. And this is the first time we're seeing that not happen. So while you may absolutely be correct that, that number isn't exactly what it seems, and they might even have had a lease back, maybe $14 million from a lease back deal of some of their property that could be included. I haven't actually looked into the specific details, but I don't believe that. I mean, the market is telling us that it doesn't really care right now, and it's future looking. And I do believe that 2020, 1 year from now in 2020, when we're seeing votes happen in New Jersey and Florida and other states, I think that the market is starting to anticipate, even though it seems early to me, a year pricing stuff in is definitely early, but it is starting to anticipate that, fall of 2020 is going to see some USMJ hype. And I do believe that TRUL has been in a daily and weekly uptrend for a couple months at this point. It has clearly been the USMJ sector leader. So as long as, we don't see any kind of 20% drop, I think everything is just fine. And the market is saying that the worst is over for now. And if we can see some daily trend changes in the Canadian MJ space, that's only going to help. The more fear that we can see alleviated from either side of the border, the better it's going to be heading into 2020.
Yeah, awesome, Dan. Okay, let's take a walk through your charts here and see how they support your theses as usual.
So just to start things off, the S&P 500 is still hitting all-time highs. And again, any kind of environment where the markets are in euphoric bull mode can only help any sector, even the ones that are struggling. But looking at CGC, the 4-hour RSI is something I mentioned. So look at the 4-hour RSI where we were at the low of Friday, and actually, nope, the low of Monday, and the open of Tuesday, and we can see that we were down at about 17. And I can scroll back and look at history and say, okay, what is the lowest price, or what is the lowest RSI level that we see on dumps for CGC? We hit 19 back in mid-October. Looking at the dump in July, we dropped down to 17. Looking at this dump, we dropped down to 22. And I can scroll back and say, wow, this is the lowest 4-hour RSI we've seen in multiple years. And the times where it has hit this level in the past, it has bounced. And right on cue, we now have a beautiful, very significant 20% bounce from the lows right on that RSI signal. So that signal alone isn't enough, but that is definitely a confidence builder for those of us that look to play dips. So aside from that, we need daily trend changes. What this move is doing now is, number one, huge volume. Let's not disregard that. We still have 4.5 hours in the trading day. We are going to see the highest bull volume day in terms of number of shares that we've seen since we were trading back in the $50 range. That is very notable. So certainly paying attention. You can see the last big bull volume day, volume was 11 million. Here we are, we're going to pass 11 million at noon. So very notable bull volume in response to the upgrade by Bank of America. So anything under 2168 is just a daily lower high. We are not changing this daily trend, and this is the anti-FOMO, fear of missing out. If you are not in a position right now, there is no need to panic. We're not just going to run forever, and that's that. We're going to top out, in my opinion, under 2168. We're going to then look for a daily higher low to form compared to 1381. And then from there, we're going to see, can the bulls change the daily trend, which is something they have struggled to do for 2 to 3 months. So that is where I'm going to be looking to make my next solid play. The bears are absolutely patiently waiting until tomorrow or Friday to be looking for the daily lower high to be set and for more significant consolidation to take place. So I have sold the majority of my bounce position, and actually, no, I'm all cash. So I have sold at this point all of my bounce position from entries end of last week, and then most of my entry was Monday morning first thing, and I keep getting my days mixed up. It was Tuesday morning first thing, but now I'm patiently waiting, and I will look for an entry on a daily higher low, and I will put my stop loss under the low of 1381, risking only bounce profits at this point. So that is my game plan going forward. As far as the USMJ space is concerned, TRUL has been our technical sector leader for a very long time. The weekly trend changed long ago. The weekly trend change was back mid-October, and wow, long ago. I guess that was only 5 weeks, but we followed through with it. And this is the highest price that we've seen in 6 months. So let's zoom out because we are looking for a monthly equilibrium on TRUL. We have our high, all-time low, so all-time high, all-time low, lower high, held support with our higher low, and we're going to be looking for a lower high compared to 2165, and then consolidation into the start of 2020. All depends on where we top out. We have a ton of space to work with. We could keep going up for another month, but that is the broader pattern that we are watching for, and bulls will be looking to enter for a monthly higher low sometime in early to mid 2020 to then be looking for an equilibrium bull break heading into the fall of 2020 and the vote. So I don't usually do predictions, and this is not a prediction. This is just the setup that I will be looking for. But I think if you look back 1 year from now and look at what ended up playing out on this chart, I bet it's going to be fairly similar to what we're looking for here. Curaleaf also had earnings, and they are responding bullish as well. So again, the more space that we create to try and change trends, the better. If we look on this weekly time frame, we've seen some great 30% plus bounces, but never a weekly higher low and higher high. So we have another weekly bounce where anything under 1084 is a weekly lower high. What we have to see is the top out of this move, wherever it is, form a weekly higher low compared to 594, and then change the weekly trend. And if we can see that happen, that is when we're going to notice a notable shift in the sector, because it will be the first time since all-time highs that has happened. Curaleaf is the sector leader as far as size, so technical sector leader, size sector leader, and definitely two of the top names in the USMJ space that have our attention. We have a slight sentiment shift. What we need is follow-through. We need daily trend changes in Canadian MJ. We need weekly trend changes in USMJ. And it's going to be an interesting 2020, and I anticipate the bulls will have plenty of opportunity, specifically heading into voting season.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been awesome to talk to you as usual. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
See you then, James. Thanks.
Let's talk about Aurora. Recently, your financials, you've more or less delivered on
Here are the
what?
headlines moving markets today.
If you're lucky to buy it 3 days ago at 37 cents,
And I think it has a lot to do with some of these smaller names giving really...
Recreational cannabis is here.
It's quite dry. So I'm going to eliminate the stocky bits.
Recently, your financials. Hey, everybody, how are you doing? We're back, and Charting Man Dan has an incredible amount to offer, and I want to say a big hello to our chat room, which we turned off inadvertently quite some time ago. Well, not turned off inadvertently. We just turned it off to see what would happen, and then we forgot to turn it back on, and I've been missing all you people. Carl, She-Vet, Keto Static, Baffinifi, she's back.
Did you turn it
Jason
on
Garza, I turned it on last night because I finally clued in.
It should be on.
I know.
It wasn't on for a while.
I know.
I like reading the comments. So like, who's that douchebag? All this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's talking about me.
Water off a duck's back. So I'm happy to see that you guys are all here. Hello, everybody. Sorry to keep you locked out of our little universe for so long, but we're a little bit slow sometimes. But anyways, so that's the state of reality in the universe in cannabis today. And
What are things closing at? What are they closing at?
Well, if you wanted to, we could start with a quick look at the Cannabis Indexes. And we haven't actually even featured them in the show today, which is very strange for us. Very strange indeed, except they're taking a little bit to load. Okay, so all green, all the time. The large cap index is up 11.54%. The small cap index is up 4.6%. The CSE index is up 8.7%. And the venture index is up 3.65%. So that's the second consecutive day of...
You know what's up huge today? Thank God.
What's that?
Acreage holdings.
Well, today's the kind of day where if you're not up...
Yeah.
That's now you've got serious problems. If you're not up on a day when everybody's up, you're in trouble. Every single stock on the large cap index is up today. TGOD added 16 cents, up 21.92% to 89 cents. Acreage up 23.8%, up 98 cents, almost a full dollar.
That's one of my worst investments ever.
And Village Farms up 13%. Even Canopy Growth Core is up
15,
16.79% to 23.72. Now, just as the overbought runs the risk of becoming, or the oversold becomes at risk of becoming overbought, you want to keep a close eye on your candles in the morning.
And tax selling season coming up.
Well, tax loss selling season arguably starts with the beginning of the fourth quarter, which started in October.
Okay.
So, and in a year where it's been like so much value vaporization, it's like tax loss selling has been done throughout the year.
I see.
So this is the interesting thing, is it's unlikely that there's a lot of selling pressure going into December from the cannabis sector, because everybody who wanted to get out got out. And so there's no longer a reason, especially with the market in reversal, to sell to cover a tax
So we hit the bottom? Was that the bottom? 2 days ago? Was 2 days ago the bottom? Friday? Friday was Friday the bottom?
I don't have a reason to say that's the case at this point, personally. There's still too much bad news out there on the horizon, I'm fearing. And but, you know, who was it? Fidelity? Or no, Bank of America came out and said that was the bottom, and they'd loaded in all of their long positions, according to Dan earlier. And so if the big banks have decided that that's the bottom, if Bank of America and Merrill Lynch and all of the large cap banks that are in the cannabis space have built their positions and are now ready to go long and are publishing the research to suggest that, then that will catalyze a long, hard bounce that won't look like a dead cat bounce for quite some time. So that could be more of a temporary reversal than a dead cat bounce. But you never know. Like, I mean, what are the big catalysts on the horizon? Who knows? There's most of them you can't see. So,
well, and then there's the biggest catalyst of all,
deprohibition in the U.S. But that's a year.
The other one. Will there be a recession? Like where a lot of stocks and the economy itself gets really hurt.
I mean, I don't think you can look at the broader economy and pretend we're not in a recession. I mean, really.
How can you say that when we're at all-time highs? You kidding me?
Well, that's the mistake a lot of people make, is thinking that because the S&P is at an all-time high that it's anything but the gauge of how much money has been printed through zero interest rate policy and quantitative easing. Don't forget, of the $15 trillion that's been printed by the G7 sovereign group in the form of quantitative easing, fractionally bank that out to a 10-to-1 ratio and then add in zero interest rate policy. I mean, what has that liquidity number become in the global economy? I mean, this is the problem. It's like when the value of the economy stops being reflected in the indexes that are become the measure of how much money's got into it, that's when you know for sure too much liquidity is in the economy and people will start to suffer. Remember when interest rates popped to 20% in 1980?
Well, I was 7 years old and really stressed by it.
Because you were flipping real estate back then, weren't you?
Yeah.
I know you were.
Yeah, big wheel to big wheel, you know? Like, I'll check out this home,
Right. Trading big wheels for crate. What was the other one? So I had a big wheel. My brother had a crazy wheel.
That was weird.
With my brother, always had to be one or the other. He was Count Chocula. I was Frankenberry.
Okay.
Like every brand, everything, my brother and I had to be on opposite sides of the pole.
By the way, next trend, emerging trend, is healthy foods. That's a market people should get into. Start investing in healthy foods.
Really?
Dude, the GEs, the Procter Gambles, they've been destroying us with the sugars and all that stuff. That's the next trend. Wait.
Well, I bought a farm.
That's smart.
I'm with you there.
These natural foods.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's pretty cool. Anyway, so in our unbridled exuberance, we have exceeded our allotted time with you, our fabulous audience, by 3 minutes. And we're very happy to see you all back. And we are very happy to see you every day going forward.
One plug. Do I have time?
It's 3 minutes after 4.
I go 5 o'clock. If you have Sirius XM, tune in to channel 167. No, we have a big show. KSI. I know these guys love him in the back there. And he fought Logan Paul if you're a YouTube fan. And then we got Tito Ortiz if you'd like to see.
There you go. That's Sirius XM 167 Canada Talks.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all tomorrow, we hope. Thanks. Bye.